So the institutional memory goes back probably 25 years. Rescue missions or life transformation ministries were always marked by a frequency and a severity of auto claims. For those of you that go to the Citygate Network convention, the past president, John Ashman, would always have people, hey, who's been here the longest? Who's your first conference? How many of you have wrecked the mission van? And there's always a bunch of people who stand up, and usually one or two executive directors, and everyone laughs. And but as those of you know, the reality of this in 2024 is auto incidents are not a laughing matter. We can very quickly have a claim that takes up a lot of time, that takes up a lot of money, and I think that brings out some of the worst parts of our society. Just the idea that someone that you're trying to help is all of a sudden now retained an attorney and is trying to sue or get money from the ministry because of sometimes a very small auto accident. And I will probably intersprinkle and interrupt Austin a couple of times to share some of these stories. But all that to say, thank you so much for joining us on this very important topic. We welcome your participation. You can unmute yourself at any time and say, well, I don't understand this, or well, our ministry does this, or you can drop it in the chat. If you have a question, probably other ministries do too. So that is kind of the end of my introduction. I will, as Austin moves to share his screen, I will tell you, Austin is one of our amazing teammates who focuses exclusively on risk control. That is helping ministries and nonprofits. He specializes in working in nonprofits, manage their risk, slip and fall, fleet safety. That's what he does all day, every day. So he's a great resource. All of you are welcome to email him with questions. You can involve John Barron or I. You don't have to, though. Austin is a resource that comes from you, being our client. So, Austin, I'm going to turn the baton over to you, and
all right,
let's
that
go.
Sounds good. Yeah, well, thank you everybody for joining. Good afternoon and good morning to everybody, depending on where you're at. Yes, James and John, please chime in as often as you would like, as well as everyone on the call. If you want to challenge anything that I'm talking about, or if you have a different opinion, anything like that, feel free. This is we enjoy an interactive session. So, going to be talking about fleet safety, auto safety, as James kind of did so nicely, kicking it off. We'll just jump right in. It's important to touch on some statistics right off the bat because they're quite alarming. So governmental statistics typically lag by 2 or 3 years. So this is 2021 data. Now that we're in 24, there might be 2022 data out there, but about 3 years old is as up to date as the government can seem to get their hands around, or these bigger organizations like the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. So in 2021, there were approximately 6.3 million reported motor vehicle crashes, which resulted in 39,000 deaths and 4.8 million injuries. So that's 1 year, 4.8 million injuries in a single year and 38,800 deaths. That comes out to a motor vehicle death occurring every 14 seconds. So that's pretty alarming. That should be alarming. That's a huge risk. We get on in vehicles every day, and sometimes get kind of a little bit laid back with how what the gravity of the vehicle that we're in, and kind of the damage that we could do to others or ourselves if we're not paying attention and really driving safely. So it's important to keep in mind just how relevant this is. And as you can see from this chart, of the 4.8 million people injured, crashes with other motor vehicles was the #1 driver of that, followed closely by fixed objects. So somebody hitting another object. That typically is a result of distracted driving. It's also a result of backing out of a parking spot, which I'll cover in a bit. But those two, hitting other vehicles and then hitting fixed objects, are the two main drivers. So a lot of avoidable accidents that we can reduce if we focus on those two things, which we will get into here. In terms of the economic cost, $72.2 billion a year, around 2 million missed work days. And a non-fatal injury crash has an average cost in the occupational commercial space of $79,000. So that's hugely expensive. That's the average. And then a fatal crash costs an average of 1.41 million. And I would say that's on the low side for today, as you hear these kind of massive news breaking fleet injury results, or like Tracy Morgan getting hit by a Walmart truck, 6 or 7 years ago. And he was awarded hundreds of millions of dollars. So that's all to say, being the organization, Citygate organization, being an organization with a name on the side of your vehicle, if you're involved in an incident, people will exploit you, to James's point. It's the unfortunate truth. And the legal world, all the billboards and commercials that you see day in and day out are there quick to jump on anyone involved in a vehicle incident with an organization. And they're quick to try to help exploit as much as possible the quote unquote deep pockets, as the layperson might see a branded vehicle. So it's all to say, everything that we're talking about today is hugely important. Also, on your insurance spend side, as you guys know, insurance is super expensive. It doesn't seem to get any cheaper or more affordable, especially in the auto space. Basically, since cell phones were, hit the market and became a mainstream item, fleet insurance has just gotten steadily more expensive. Losses have become more expensive, more extensive, more frequent, etc. People just cannot get off of their cell phones. And I get it. As a safety professional, I have to fight the urge just as much as everyone on the other side of this screen as you all. So there's no silver bullet cure, but the best approach is putting it on do not disturb and putting it somewhere where you physically can't reach the phone. But as long as cell phones are around, auto insurance is going to continue to keep increasing until eventually the driverless cars take over. But so
Yeah,
some
and
premium.
one
Yeah, go
statistic
ahead.
I've seen from one personal auto insurance carrier suggests that almost 30% of auto accidents are related to distracted driving.
Yeah.
Something to do with either your cell phone or the radio or something you're eating or something you're grabbing. Um, and it's interesting. I think that if all of you polled your drivers and spoke to your drivers and you said, hey, is it dangerous to use your cell phone while you're driving? I think all of them would say yes. They know it's kind of it's almost like smoking. People know that yes, smoking can be bad for your health, but many people choose to do it anyway. Cell phone usage is very similar. It's not that people don't know that it's unsafe, it's that they're choosing to do it anyway. And so a lot of the battle for this information is more than just education and your driver saying, oh, wow, I never realized that before. It's we're trying to have a culture of driving where everyone is buying in and saying, wow, it's just so important to the mission of our organization that we drive in an undistracted and a safe way. Um, so back to
Absolutely.
you, Austin.
No, very, very well said. And if anybody challenges whether or not it is a safe thing to do, texting and driving, just ask them if they've ever seen somebody texting and driving, because sometimes if we're doing it ourselves, we have this false sense of security, or like we somehow are in more control than the person next to us driving. But if you've ever been on a highway and looked over and seen somebody texting while they're on the road, it's jarringly unsafe to see, and that's you as well. So you look the exact same. You're not immune to
Mhm,
that. So
mhm.
it's hugely, hugely dangerous. But in terms of premium cost drivers, what's driving your insurance costs? Your driver safety habits, kind of first and foremost. How often are you having losses? The frequency of your losses, the severity of your losses. Um, all of that is a direct correlation to how much you are going to be paying in insurance. So that's why it's important that we get these trainings out there, we educate drivers, and we consistently reinforce those positive behaviors and redirect negative behaviors. The constant touch point and the constant bringing it up is what you have to do. It has to become a habit because the cell phone is already a habit deeply entrenched in your brain. You pull out a phone before you even have the thought that you want to look at your phone sometimes. So it takes a lot to combat that, and really the only way to do that is by consistent reinforcement of these principles. Also, as James and I were kind of talking at the beginning of this, if you were on, vehicle costs and crashworthiness is skyrocketed. Gone are the days of a $400 fender bender. If you hit a fender now, it's 2,500 bucks at the bare minimum. There's sensors, there's cameras, there's plastic clips that only go in one way, and you have to replace whole panels now. So things just cost much, much more in general, which is also driving the auto coverage increase. And then there's something called negligent entrustment, which this is really important to nonprofit organizations. Really what this is knowingly putting somebody behind the wheel that should not be behind the wheel, or knowingly putting an individual in a situation to oversee individuals who should not be in that situation. And why this is so bad, number one, it breeds losses, and if someone has a poor driving record and multiple DUIs or something, that's a sign that they're going to make poor decisions behind the road. But two, more importantly, for a nonprofit organization is the public opinion, the court of public opinion. If somebody gets into a wreck, and God forbid, a fatal wreck, and then it goes to court and they see that that individual had a DUI in the past 6 months, and then they look at Citygate and they say, well, why would you put someone behind the wheel who had a DUI? They clearly were unfit, or their license was suspended. That's when these lawsuits can really balloon into massive catastrophic losses. So that's why in a bit we'll touch on kind of MVR procedures and driver qualifications. That's why those are so important, to make sure that we are qualifying everybody who we're giving keys to before they get into the vehicles. So there's four types of accidents that are historically the most costly and the most severe. And those would be rear end collisions, intersection collisions, pedestrian and cyclist collisions, and head on collisions. So the bottom two, you can tell pedestrian, if you hit somebody and you're in a vehicle and they're not, it doesn't take much to imagine why that's a very, very severe incident. And then head on collisions, if two vehicles are hitting head on, it's rare that that results in minimal damage. Rear end collisions are becoming the most costly because, again, cell phones, people are just not even touching their brakes. They're slamming into vehicles. We covered the cost. And
yeah, and I would say, unfortunately, within the Citygate network, there's a lot of rear end collisions, and almost all of them are low speed collisions. Yep. The feedback I always get in looking at the claims, James, the driver was barely moving. They were coming to a stop. It's usually not a highway rear end collision. It's a stopping and going at an intersection rear end collision. And unfortunately, if you rear end someone, the way that the law works in most municipalities and states, it's 100% your fault. So it's very difficult to say, well, they did something. You're rear ending. There's not a lot of defense there.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. Rear end collisions are pretty much entirely at fault, meaning they could be avoidable accidents, and they're avoidable by increasing your following distance, which we'll touch on shortly. But there's no rear end collision that could happen if you have an adequate following distance, unless somebody is reversing, going the wrong way in traffic. But 99% of these, if there was increased following distance, they wouldn't happen. So that is looked at as an avoidable incident by the insurance carrier. In terms of the most frequent types of accidents, those were the most costly and severe. What we see the most frequently, aside from rear end collisions, because that is, again, the most frequent from the distracted driving, but side swipes, backing, and striking parked vehicles. If you notice, all of these are incidents that are happening behind or to the side of a vehicle. So again, this is that really focusing on spatial awareness, making sure that when we're backing, we're checking our mirrors often. We're not relying only on the backup camera. Striking parked vehicles, we already covered, is the second leading cost of vehicle accidents is hitting stationary objects. So again, very avoidable accidents here. It just takes that extra moment to get out and look. So there's an acronym for backing called GOAL, GOAL, get out and look. And basically, before you back anything out of a spot, you want to make sure that you get out, you walk the perimeter of your vehicle, and you look to make sure that you are aware of what your surroundings look like, rather than getting in the car and figuring it out from your mirrors.
Yeah, and I think this is an especially great touch point for our thrift drivers who might be driving box trucks. You know, you don't have to have a CDL to drive one of these, but it's a lot different from driving a sedan or a minivan. And I think just an increased emphasis on this for the drivers of our bigger vehicles, is, I think, very important.
Absolutely. And one thing with putting people in bigger vehicles like box trucks, you could drive a Mini Cooper all day long, and then you get in a box truck and it's an entirely different machine, right? So what's really important is that we're, again, qualifying our drivers. And I have a sample over the road driving test that I could share with everybody. But really, it's important that we put you as a supervisor, or the fleet supervisor, whoever's in charge of the fleet operations, uh, go on a ride along with new drivers and just have a predetermined route in an area that's not super busy. It can just be kind of a square around a few blocks around your organization. But just get in the car and make sure that they can handle driving that vehicle before we just hand over the keys to a $80,000 box truck. We want to make sure that they aren't going to freak out, or that they can, at bare minimum, drive the vehicle around the block without running over curbs, sideswiping trees, etc. So just that 5-minute over the road driver's test, that's a good message to the employee that you care about their safety. You want to make sure that they're qualified. If they're not qualified, we're going to spend some time to get them up to speed and get those shadowing hours, riding along with a more experienced driver until they feel comfortable. But some kind of over the road test is really, really important. And it also goes a long way with your insurance carriers. If we can show, at renewal, a stack of pre-qualification over the road tests for our drivers, that's going above and beyond our other nonprofit, similar networks. And
Hey, working in the dark.
that's what really will
I'm
make
just
you
listening.
stand out and look favorable.
Everything
Yeah.
okay with you
And
guys?
one of our participants is asking, and I think Ashley may be in New York, which may have different rules. Can we do a driver's test as part of an interview?
So that's good. I don't believe
I have
you
not
can.
heard of that being done, but I don't.
Yeah, I don't think you can qualify the individual. I don't think you could not give someone the job as a result, but I would have to look into that. That's a good question. I don't know if there's any discrimination crossover there,
Mhm.
because there is like capabilities tests which are similar, but let me look
My
into that
assumption
for you.
is, yeah, my assumption is if it's a BFOQ, bona fide occupational qualification, that there is some room to be able to determine whether or not that person can reasonably, justifiably drive for you. You may have to set up a remediation plan, try to get them up to speed. But yeah, I do believe that that's the case. We'll have to do a little bit more looking. Great question, Ashley.
That is a good question. Taking out. Okay. Yeah, I will get back
Thank
to you
you.
on that.
I'll follow up with you then.
Perfect.
I wouldn't expect less.
That's right. That's right.
All right. So in terms of defensive driving, when we talk about defensive driving, this is really just protecting yourselves from others on the road. I don't know if anyone here drives a motorcycle or has ever driven a motorcycle. I've done a good amount of motorcycle riding myself. I live in New York City. I don't currently own one, but my father-in-law back in Kansas City does, and I ride pretty much every time I go home. But as a motorcycle rider, you have to assume every single person on the road doesn't see you. You cannot pull up to an intersection knowing that you were there first and drive through it, assuming the other person is going to follow the rules. You can't go around someone on a highway assuming that they see you there. Every single thing you have to do is done with this mindset of they don't know I'm here. I have to give myself, an out. I have to give myself a cushion of space. And that's really the mindset that our drivers should have over the road, especially when we're in something like a box truck, is we have to make sure that we are anticipating hazards that other people might be promoting before they happen. And it's not always easy to do, but if you think about when you first got in a vehicle, when you were 16 years old or 15 getting your permit, uh, think about the way that you were in that vehicle. You were two hands on the wheel, you were scanning the road. It was all so new, it was so much information. You were not texting and driving on 30 minutes into your first time driving. You weren't adjusting the radio, the car was silent. That's really the best approach, is to think about how you were when you first got into a vehicle and try to emulate those same efforts in terms of where your energy is going, which is purely defensively looking out, making sure that you're aware of what everyone else is doing. Being proactive and prepared is really the key to defensive driving. So on the other end of that coin, offensive driving is what we don't want to do, right? Only paying attention to your own skills. This picture right here is a great example. Writing on a notebook, drinking coffee, talking on the phone, like all kinds of things wrong with this. And these are the kind of pictures, this is a stock image, obviously, but if you think that distracted driving is unsafe, and you look at a picture like this, clearly this individual should not be moving in a vehicle doing all of this. And I have this athletic stance picture here. If you've ever played any sports, there's something called the athletic stance where your knees are bent, you're ready to go. If it's baseball, if you're guarding somebody in basketball, you have to be in this athletic position so that you can respond to what's happening around you. And that's kind of the mindset that you should take into the cab when you're driving a vehicle as well. Make sure that your chair is set up and your mirrors are set up so that everything is easy for you to see. You're not leaning so far back that you can't adequately move around the steering wheel. You want to be kind of arms bent, ready to react in an athletic position. So that's just a good kind of visual to keep in mind. And I want to jump to YouTube real quick. I know John has seen this before because I did it in my last training. This is called an awareness test. I want you guys to watch this 1-minute video and see how you do on this awareness test, to see how aware you are. This might be applicable to your over-the-road driving skills. And I have the audio shared, so you should be able to hear it, but even if you can't, just count how many times the basketball is passed.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13.
Did everybody get 13? I can't see everybody.
You got 12.
Anybody got 13? You got
I
12?
don't know if I
Okay.
got to 13.
All right, hold
I
on
got
now.
12.
Yeah.
But did you see the moonwalking bear?
12.
Did you see the moonwalking bear? Did anybody? Let's rewatch this again. Let's keep our eye out for a moonwalking bear. This guy right here in the middle of the screen.
Yeah.
So I saw him, but he looked like the Grim Reaper.
Yeah, the visuals on this probably on my screen, it's not the highest definition.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking gorilla. Yeah, exactly. The message here is it's easy to miss things that you're not looking for, right? So when we're driving over the road, we have to be looking for hazards, looking for other people to make mistakes. And if we're not, it can be too late by the time we realize that they happen. So that's kind of just a fun little, it's actually an awareness marketing campaign for cyclists, keeping your eyes out for bicyclists over the road. So very applicable. But as I said, you should have a cushion of safety when you're driving a vehicle, scanning every 3 to 5 seconds and really looking forward quite a bit. As you can see, these pictures do a good job of kind of showing what we're talking about, but scanning your mirrors, making sure that before you're changing lanes or turning, that you are you've checked for any surroundings, whether those are people on foot, vehicles, etc. Speeding is behind distracted driving, just one of the biggest issues that we have over the road. Killed about 11,000 people back in 2020. But to prevent speeding, really in an occupational setting, there's no excuse for speeding. We should not ever be speeding. I know in a personal vehicle, there's kind of what we call condoned violations. People think that you're typically not going to get a ticket for 5-7 miles over the speed limit. You are breaking the law, but it's kind of a condoned violation. So as a safety professional, I use that as an example for supervisors.
Mhm.
We don't want to ever have condoned violations anywhere within your network. We don't want people bending the rules when it comes to overseeing youth or field trip permission slips. We just want to make sure that every
Mhm.
rule that we have is followed and buttoned up, and that there's no condoned violations, because those bending the rules areas, once something does happen on any type of loss, that's when, again, these losses can really balloon into huge issues and legal issues.
And this is a huge thing for those of you on the line who are supervisors of drivers, or who have supervisors of drivers who are working for you. Because if you emphasize with a straight face, we are paying you to drive this way under the speed limit, they're going to understand this is what expected of me as an employee and a driver of this ministry.
Yeah.
But if you're not taking that hard line because in your own mind you're like, well, on the weekends I drive 5 or 10 over, maybe I shouldn't push it so much, they're going to push the envelope. So, at least from my perspective, saying, hey, we're paying you to drive this way, that's something I can say with a straight face. I think different ministries, different leadership styles have different ways of doing that, but it is really important that you sort of know what your driver's direct supervisors are saying to them about this.
Absolutely. And anything that you do, if you bend the rules once, they will follow your actions and bend the rules. So it's important as a supervisor, especially, to do the right thing. There's also Ray Kroc is the inventor of, or the kind of quoted founder of McDonald's. He was kind of credited for the whole approach to the franchise model, etc. He very famously, every time he visited his stores, before he went inside, he would walk around the parking lot and pick up trash, and then he would go inside every single store he went to. And this became known by his employees and staff and everything else. And it's a really great example of, if the founder, CEO, big man in charge is not above picking up trash, then no one else within the organization should be. And it's a good example of a supervisor leading by example and always doing the right thing, because everyone underneath you is looking to you and they're mimicking what you're doing. And it goes the other way. If you're cutting corners, you are telling everyone that it's okay to cut corners. So really, really important, especially in the nonprofit space and some of our more sensitive interactions that we have. We have to be following everything by the book. So we want to not speed. We want to use cruise control if we need to. We want to leave earlier if we need to. And in terms of following distances, this is really important. The standard for a light vehicle, so a passenger vehicle, is 4 to 6 seconds, and for a heavy vehicle, so a box truck or anything bigger than that, 6 to 8 seconds. Really important. So if you just count, 1001, 1002, 1003 as a vehicle in front of you passes a tree that you have a good view of, or a light, anything like that, that's a good way to kind of gauge where you're at. And sorry, I need to see the next slide. If you're like city driving or something like that, I'm in Manhattan, so you can't really leave 8 seconds of space. If you're going low speeds, at the bare minimum, you want to be able to see the pavement in front of your vehicle. You should never be so close to a vehicle that you can't see, at least a car's worth of pavement in between you and the vehicle. But those are just kind of big city rules. Everywhere else, the vast majority of America, we want to be following that 6 to 8 second following distance. And this is why it's so important. So it takes about 1 second to recognize a hazard, for your brain to identify a hazard. It takes about 3/4 of a second after that for your brain to tell your body to react and hit the brakes. And then the braking distance, if we look on the side, if you're going 50 miles per hour, it's about 125 feet, 70 miles per hour, 246 feet. At about 75, 77 miles per hour, it's 300 feet. So that's the length of a football field for you to stop. So if you think about 300 feet, 100 yards on a football field, that's too much distance to stop for most hazards. If you think of a deer running on the road or anything, you're not going to typically get 300 feet in front of you. So the following distance and the speed is really, really important to make sure that we're giving ourselves plenty of cushion, because even half of a football field, at 60 miles per hour, we're over half of a football field. And that's if you immediately responded to hitting the brakes, you're still going 180 feet for that vehicle to come to a stop. So that's a lot of distance before we are getting to a safe stopping speed. Intersections, as we talked about, have a lot of opportunity for incidents to occur. There's multiple cars going in multiple directions. There's foot traffic. There's all kinds of things. When we're talking about stopping distance, we also have to take into consideration roadway conditions. Obviously, everything we're talking about today is for ideal conditions. If there's rain, if there's snow, if there's heavy leaves, anything like that on the ground, we want to reduce speeds and increase following times. And the speed limit that's posted on the side of the road is for ideal weather conditions. 65 miles per hour is for an ideal day. If it's raining, if it's freezing, anything like that, that should be reduced accordingly. Let's see. When entering an intersection, you don't ever want to be the very first one through the box or the very last one through the box. So if you're the first in line and the light turns green, give it just 1 second. Count just 1001 and then slowly pull into the intersection, because so often we have people racing to beat that yellow turning to red, or people who are on their phones and just don't even see the red light and they blast right through it. So if you're the first one through the box, through the intersection, you want to give it just a quick beat to make sure that it's safe. Look both ways, look left, look right, look left again, and then go. And then if you are the last one, if the light is turning yellow, or going from yellow to red, you don't want to push it and be the last one, because somebody might be early jumping the gun, sitting at that red light when it turns green, and you basically just want to give yourself a cushion of space on both sides of those. Something really important, as we're talking about box trucks, anything like a box truck, is something called squaring your turns. This is very common for CDL drivers, for big 18-wheelers. Basically, when we drive a personal vehicle, we don't square our turns. So if you're looking at where this bus is, the way that most of us drive is we would swipe through a turn. We would basically go from point A to point C. We would kind of have this arch through the intersection. If you watch any bus or 18-wheeler turn a corner, they do what's called squaring, meaning they go all the way up until they're perpendicular to the road that they're going to turn. So they'd go from A to B. They check their mirrors. So this is big for cyclists or traffic that's passing on either side of you. And then they make their turn and they go from B to C. That's called squaring your turn. And anything bigger than a personal passenger vehicle, you should always be squaring your turn. Even a personal passenger vehicle, it's good practice to do this, again, for the cyclist, it gives you that moment to see straight down the road behind you using your mirrors to make sure somebody's not coming behind you, because we see so many incidents where we turn and then a biker or someone will hit us and they result in really serious injuries, even though it was their bike hitting us. Just, if you've ever ridden a bicycle at a heavy pace, hitting a vehicle is going to cause a lot of damage. So squaring your turns is something to pass on to your workforce. There's plenty of YouTube videos about exactly how to do it, if you want to look more into that. But if that's a new principle to you, I would encourage you to pass that down to anyone who reports to you. In terms of texting and driving, hands-free means your hands are absolutely free. It doesn't mean you're holding your phone in your lap, and so it can pick up your speakerphone, etc. It's really important that we have a no tolerance, no texting, no talking policy while we're driving. So a lot of us use phones for maps, GPS. If that's the case, we want to have a station, and we want to have all of that loaded up before we get in the vehicle. And if we have to adjust it for any reason, take the next exit, go to a gas station, park, and adjust it. You don't ever want to be messing with it while you're over the road. It just takes a split second. It's never worth it. And that goes for eating, using apps, taking pictures, changing the radio, all of those things. Just those split seconds are all it takes to get into an incident. So be very
And
careful.
on that topic, Austin, I remember giving a similar presentation to this at one of the Citygate Midwest meetings on this topic, and we asked, how many of you have GPS in the vehicles for your drivers? And everyone in that particular room said, no, we don't. And so the consensus was that drivers had to rely on their phones for GPS to go places. I'm curious for the ministries on this call. Do any of you put on, what would you call that, Austin? A cell phone holder, like that you put into the air vents that holds your phone
phone
for
mount,
GPS?
anything like that. Yeah.
Do any of you have those preloaded in your vehicles? You can just reply in the chat.
I saw a couple of head shakes. Yeah, no. Yeah, it's not uncommon to not provide those, but I will say it's a very good use of, $15 on Amazon or whatever a phone mount cost. There's all different kinds, but I would certainly look at budgeting for those, installing them into your vehicles. We can't expect our drivers to do something that we're not kind of setting them up for success. It is our responsibility to make sure that they have all the tools they need to do their job safely. So yeah, I would look at budgeting those into your, or start rolling them out into your vehicles. You can even do it in phases. In terms of adjusting your mirrors, this is really important as well. So these shapes, this is a person's head. Basically, your left mirror, you want to lean your head to the side, and you should be able to just see the very, very back edge of your vehicle, or even better is just an inch outside of that. So if your head's tilted to the side, you should basically see, the very edge. And then if you lean kind of to the middle, basically in line with where your rear view mirror would be, that's where you want to set your right mirror up to do the same thing. You want to just catch that very back right edge of your vehicle. If you set your mirrors up that way, then when you're sitting in your normal position, that gives you the maximum coverage on both sides of your mirror. And if you are in a personal passenger vehicle, you can then adjust your rear view mirror so that covers everything in between. And you can just simply have somebody walk behind you while you're parked and watch them from each mirror. And as they leave your right side mirror, you should be able to clock them in your rear view mirror. And as they leave that mirror, they should show up in your left side mirror if your mirrors are set up like this. So that's a good practice to do if you haven't already. And everybody's different size and shape. So this is, again, a message that should be reinforced often. If we're all sharing vehicles or driving different vehicles, making sure that we're adjusting the mirrors before we leave every single time. All right, backing into, not out of parking spots, very important. I talked about this earlier. So many incidents happen from striking parked objects, and it's the vast majority of the time is in a parking lot. It's always safer to back into a parking spot, and then you can pull out straight forward. Because as you approach a spot, you can scan the area, you see what hazards are there. So you can adjust for those and then back into your spot, as opposed to getting into your vehicle, like I talked about earlier, and then kind of checking your mirrors to gather your surroundings once you're in the vehicle. If you did pull into the spot and you're leaving, you want to get out and look, make that perimeter walk around your vehicle and make sure that you're aware of everything that's parked around you. We want to be doing a quick pre-trip, post-trip inspection, basically just looking at, our tires properly inflated. Do we have windshield washer fluid, or do our turn signals and all of that work? And really important, if anything's wrong with any vehicles or any of our employees' vehicles, we want to make sure that we take care of that. We don't want to ask for these inspections to be done and then ignore the results. Those are that's a good way to lose buy-in or lose trust with your workforce is kind of involving them in a decision or involving them in a process and then ignoring the outcome of that. And on the flip side, really paying attention, making those changes, that communicates the opposite side, that we do care. We want to make sure you're safe. We want to make sure that you're set up for success. So make sure that employees know the correct plan of action when something is off on their vehicle. They know where to go and who to talk to. If anyone gets into an accident, this is also important to share with people over the road. We want to call 911, obviously, if anyone is in immediate danger, or if we're in danger, or the vehicle is in a spot where there's a lot of traffic, etc. If it's just a very light fender bender, sometimes we don't always have to call 911, but for the most part, it's part of the process. I won't go through all these, but we want to move the vehicle off to the side of the road if we can. Obviously, we want to be careful of traffic. Want to call the police, and we don't want to admit fault or make apology statements. Want to make sure that we gather information, and we don't want to sign anything unless the police are having you sign something. And we want to get the supervisor informed of the situation immediately. So some things to say and not to say. Yeah.
Just want to jump in. Taking pictures gathers more information than we would ever imagine. A little over a year ago, my wife was involved in an accident. We just took pictures around the vehicle, and when the other insurance company was not willing to pay because they weren't sure yet whether their vehicle had hit our vehicle, I looked at the pictures. I said, well, there's skid marks in the snow. Do you need any more information? They said, nope, send me the pictures and we'll get this handled right away. So yeah,
Absolutely.
you can sometimes pick up information that you would never expect when you just take a ton of pictures.
Yeah, absolutely, John. That's
I see.
huge.
Thanks for
Hugely
creating that
important.
slide for me.
Yeah, no, you nailed it. You covered it. Take more pictures than you need. Take a video, take wide angles, take close-up shots. Those pictures of the skid marks in the snow are hugely important to the process. If you don't need them, eventually you can delete them. But in the moment, make sure that you document every single detail that you can from multiple angles. So very well said. And I will touch briefly on a few things to say instead of other things we should not be saying. So it's important that we're definitive when we're speaking and we're not admitting fault. Saying things, it's hard to do in the moment, but that's why it's good to train and get this in people's minds. Saying things like, oh, I think that you pulled in front of me, or no, I'm not her, oh, I'm sorry. All of these things, it's human nature to apologize, especially if you just ran into somebody. But there could be other factors involved with what happened in that incident. And when you get a call 2 weeks later from their insurance and they're speaking to you and they say, well, the police have it reported that you apologized at the scene for rear-ending them, that immediately means that you had admitted fault and it was documented by the law enforcement and you're on the hook, whether or not there were other factors that could have split up the liability. Being not definitive, like I think this happened, they can quote that. They can say, well, at the site, you weren't quite sure. You said you thought I cut you off, but he's positive that you cut him off. And then it's a he said, she said situation. So it's okay to say, I don't recall. There's things like that are more definitive without admitting fault. You answer any questions that are asked by the police. And if they say, let's settle this ourselves, or if you have the thought to do that, I would encourage you to call the police and get them involved so that it can be properly documented. Okay. So in terms of a fleet program, we'll get into a bit of some of the written protocols here. This kind of 6 keys to an effective program that are laid out in terms of identifying all your drivers, everyone who drives full-time, who might drive a vehicle, who drives their own vehicle. You want to identify all of your drivers and have those driver lists ready to go. You have to have leadership support on the fleet safety. It has to be financially backing any, telematics or cameras that you put in the vehicles, or financially backing the training that might be needed. You can't do anything without that top leadership support when it comes to safety, really across the board. Really important that we're screening and selecting your drivers carefully, which I've got a slide on shortly. We want to train and manage our drivers on a regular, ongoing basis. Again, this isn't a once a year thing. We want to consistently reinforce. We have Gallagher Step, our online safety training and education platform that has a bunch of defensive driving modules that are 10 to 15 minutes in length. Those are great for, quarterly refreshers, or if someone gets in an accident, kind of a post-accident refresher course. They are value added, meaning they don't cost money for the first 10 with unlimited sign-ins. So you can get 10 different topics a year at no cost to roll out to your whole network if you would like. We want to manage crashes when they occur. That means taking all the proper pictures, documenting, and then doing an accident investigation to follow up and make sure that we're identifying root causes and avoiding those in the future. And then establishing written policies and procedures. Again, if we don't have detailed rules and policies, it's very tough to enforce anything because there's a lot of gray areas. We want to make sure that we have a formal fleet safety program. And I have,
And I would say, Austin, that I
Yeah.
think that formal fleet safety program is sort of the bedrock.
Mhm.
You can have a lot of ministries just have a page or two. I think we need to start to transition to more comprehensive fleet safety manuals that you give
Mhm.
drivers. And, they're not going to memorize all of it on the first day, but having that kind of detailed examples, in this situation, do this, and this situation, do this, your training can then hit on different parts of the manual. And it's kind of the guide for what training ought to be. And then, you know, when your driver is doing something that is, not in compliance with the manual, you can say, hey, you per the manual this, per the manual that, it's going to be more clear. Because we really, in today's litigious environment, we have to help all of our drivers operate at a higher level of excellence. That's the nature of doing ministry in 2024.
It is. And getting insurance coverage. Most carriers anymore are demanding a fleet safety policy that touches on all of these aspects. So if any one of these aren't there, if there's no distracted driving statement, the insurance carrier will come to us and say, hey, we don't see a clause about distracted driving. We need to see that before we're comfortable with the policy. So I have this sample fleet safety program that's comprehensive. I'll share it with everybody here. You can take the entire thing. You can, borrow whatever you would like from it. It's yours to do with. And as you can see, there's some red parts where you can kind of drop in your company specific information and make it your own. In terms of driver qualification files, so we want to make sure that we are running MVRs at least annually on everybody driving a vehicle. And want to make sure that we are checking those MVRs against something like this sample criteria, and we're using the same criteria across the board. We can't let our maybe not applicable to nonprofits. Sometimes I have clients who will have their number one sales guy, but he had a DUI, and they say, well, he's too good of a sales guy. We can't take him off the payroll, or we can't take
Well,
away his car.
I do have an example. I had
Do you?
a
Okay.
nonprofit, not a Citygate Network member. They had a former client who was an amazing speaker at fundraising events.
Mhm.
But he did not have a good driving record, and he in fact caused an accident that I think maybe $800,000 was paid out on. And again, it was sort of questionable circumstances. Someone just a pedestrian appeared walking between two cars. It wasn't, someone that we could have, it was easily seen. But, he was someone that the organization said, oh, we really want to have him go out and do fundraising. So, and
Exactly.
those of you who work with us at Gallagher, if you're sending MVRs to our MVR email box, they are getting screened. We ask you for your driver's list every year on renewal. So we're helping with that, but we don't know if someone's driving unless your team is telling us. So, my assumption is that everyone is very, very attentive to, hey, you haven't been screened yet, you're not driving, but we got to be 100% in this area.
Absolutely. Yeah, the reputational risk at risk is huge if you have someone with a very poor driving record gets into a big accident, it just exacerbates every side of the insurance spend, the media attention, all kinds of things that we don't want. So that goes for anyone driving a company vehicle as well as a non-owned vehicle. So if you have someone who drives their own vehicle around on behalf of you, your organization every day, there's something called a hired non-owned auto policy, which I think I talk about it next. So I'll just jump right to it. You want to have a hired non-owned auto policy for anyone using their own personal vehicle for work or for rental vehicles if you have people renting vehicles. So this is basically a policy stating that although they're in their own vehicle, they have to carry adequate insurance limits. They still have to get their MVR checked. They still should go under the same driver training protocol, the same maintenance, and their MVR is graded against the same criteria. So this is just the exact same risk if I'm driving my vehicle versus your vehicle and I get in a wreck on company time. It hits the claims books the exact same way. So a lot of times people think since it's not a company car, it doesn't matter, but it does. So anyone who's doing that more than, once a year, sometimes someone will run to Home Depot once a year, and that's, there's a bit of wiggle room, but for the most part, if anyone's driving their car on any regular basis, want to make sure that they're getting properly vetted. This, I can share this as well. This is also within that sample fleet safety policy that I have. In terms of insurance coverages, I think this was, geared for if you needed to know.
dig into this.
Yeah, I think everybody kind of knows what these are. This was a bit of basics. But again, volunteers using company vehicles should go through the same process. They should have their MVRs ran, etc. We want to make sure we're taking pictures of accidents like we talked about. And you want employees to acknowledge and sign off on your fleet safety programs. And it's best to kind of reintroduce them on an annual basis, if not more. As we know, we've all started a job and probably quickly signed off a lot of paperwork that we didn't necessarily read top to bottom. This driver's safety manual isn't the most exciting thing to read. It's maybe good for, putting you to sleep at night. So there's a good chance people aren't combing through every single detail, which is why we want to reinforce the principles of it often through, constant communication, quick toolbox talk, flash trainings, 5 minutes on distracted driving, once a month, 5 minutes on winter driving before the winter months, etc. Just that constant reinforcement is really the only way to prevent accidents.
In Austin, do we have any kind of data on, I know with a lot of employee injuries in general, we know this from workers' compensation data, it's employees who are there in their first 9 months or the first year who have a disproportionate amount of claims. Do we have any data on that? Or anecdotal evidence on, is it really new drivers or can it really happen to anyone?
Yeah, anecdotally for sure, it's new drivers. I would have to check if we have, in our Gallagher Drive system that kind of broken out because we definitely have a lot of data around this. But I do know with all of my nonprofit clients, it's putting those people who haven't driven a box truck in a box truck or even in a van, a Sprinter van. It's just a different size vehicle. And so many of my nonprofits here in New York City need people badly, and they have to kind of loosen up some MVR parameters sometimes, and we always encourage them not to. But sometimes their mission needs to get done, and they're kind of scrambling, and they'll put people in vehicles without properly vetting or getting that over the road test. And those are the incidents that constantly pop up and bite them because they put someone who wasn't prepared. So yeah, definitely. And you can circumvent that by, again, having people shadow for longer periods of time, do ride-alongs for longer with a more experienced employee rather than giving them the keys on day 1 or 2 and hoping for the best.
All right.
I'll wrap up quick here. I've got a couple more slides, but there's also telematics. I don't know does anyone here have any telematics in their vehicles? So like technology that tracks.
I think a lot of people do.
Yeah. Okay. Is anyone here with Philadelphia insurance? on the auto?
I don't know. We
I know
might,
they've gotten
maybe
out
one
of
or
a
two.
lot
A
of
lot of
things.
folks are with Great American now.
Great American. Okay. I asked because Philly offers free telematics. If you happen to have Philadelphia for the auto,
Mhm.
you can get these for free through Philly. But if you want to look into this, we also have a few preferred vendors that we really like to work with, and we can get a slight discount on them. So if ever you want to look into telematics, this is a really effective way to kind of really see exactly what your driver's behavior is like and compare apples to apples. If you have James and I driving and I'm harsh braking 30 times an hour and he's harsh braking 6 times an hour, you can see that Austin is clearly a driver that we want to focus on more training. We want to coach him more than James, right? So it's a good way, even being in New York City compared to Des Moines, Iowa, you can kind of look at people within the region and see against your own network who's driving in what way. So telematics have a ton of data and can be really used to move the needle. And then safety committees are hugely important to move the needle with any nonprofit. This is kind of the first thing I always want to do is get them set up with regular meetings where they get together and talk about safety. For auto losses, this is a great place to review accident reports, review photos of accidents, just spreading the knowledge, getting together on a bi-monthly, quarterly basis to just talk about safety really goes a long way. It gets people in the mindset. You can also recruit high-performing individuals into the committee and get more buy-in. You can recruit low-performing individuals into the committee and kind of get them into the more engaged category. It's a great way to get people feeling like they have buy-in within the organization and that their opinion matters. So if you don't have a safety committee set up, I also have a bulletin on how to set those up and what they look like. But these are a great place to roll out, training needs or implementing a fleet safety policy. All the things we talked about today, this conversation could take place within a safety committee and it would be perfect. And again, in the marketing efforts, when we're marketing you versus your competitor, if we can show, 6 bi-monthly meetings that you had over the year and those safety minutes, the minutes from your agenda that show what was spoken about and what was reviewed, carriers love that. It goes a long way and it shows a really proactive approach. So with that is just at the top of the hour. Any questions? I can stay on if anyone has questions, but if you got to jump, that's totally fine as well.
Yeah,
So
please
before
butt
you
in.
split,
Yeah, go ahead,
and
John.
while you're, if you have any questions before you split, if we mentioned 3 different things that we have resources or can help with. One is the training program. If you're interested in the training, just type the word STEP in chat. Faith, I already saw your comment. Thank you. If you're interested in assistance with driver training, just type driver training. And if you're interested in assistance with safety committee and getting that set up, just type safety. We'll take your notes and we'll circle back with you after the meeting.
Yes, or you can email us, but yeah, the goal, every ministry's driver safety program is going to look a little different, but the goal is there's different interventions you can use with the screening of drivers, the training of drivers, the manual, the telematics. We didn't talk about front and rear facing cameras. The goal is to layer the different controls so that when adverse circumstances happen, a combination of your controls is picking them up, and we are, trying to avoid a catastrophe.
Absolutely.
Laura, all you're listed as is a guest. Can you give us your last name as well, please?
Oh, she gave us her email address.
Oh, she got it.
So
Okay, we're
I'll
good.
write
Yes,
her.
thank you so much.
All right. Thank you all. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you.